can you ask your dog which is their favorite toy? Or who is their favorite family member? Because, let's be honest, you know they have favorites. These are the kinds of questions that have intrigued me my entire life. And the answers I have found is what I would like to share with you today. Let me tell you a story. When I was 5 years old, I used to spend summer vacations with my grandparents in their farm. They lived in this beautiful coffee farm in Colombia with the cutest Cocker Spaniel dog you have ever seen called Cala. She had this very soft fur that you just had to pet. The only problem was that Cala was not a big fan of kids. My grandmother used to warn us, if you touch her, she'll bite you. I was normally a very obedient kid and follow rules. The only problem was that I really wanted to pet Cala more than anything else. So I had a plan. I was determined. I decided that my hands were very small, and that the smallest part of my hand was my pinky finger. So I thought that if I approached Cala just with my pinky finger, she would not feel threatened. So one afternoon, I came in, kind of very cautious. I extended my pinky and I gave her a little pet, ready to run, but she allowed me to pet her. So I started every single day for 30 seconds to pet her in secret, and I added one finger at a time, until I was able to pet her with my entire hand. I barely contained my happiness, that is, until my grandmother caught me. So since I'm 5 years old, I've been trying to answer the same questions. How do we know what animals are thinking? How can we discover what they fear? How can we discover what they're like? And once we find this, what is the right way to interact with them? Answering these questions has been the aim of my academic research life, and I'm going to share you the answers I found. So, since the 17th century, we have tried different approaches to understand animal minds. And probably one of the most well-known is the one by Descartes in the 17th century. He thought that animals were just automata, mechanisms, that would not have an internal mental life, so they wouldn't have pain or suffering. He concluded this because he thought that animals lacked something that we all humans have, language. Those who embrace this approach later, of course, use animals for experimentations without thinking about their pain and suffering because they were just mechanisms. Luckily, this is not the case anymore. Researchers instead are now focusing on finding the amazing cognitive and emotional lives that animals have for many different species, arachnids, insects, mammals, fish, birds, and we have created committees around the world to make sure that we treat animals properly during experimentation. I think this is geared in the right direction, but I think that we can do better. I believe that we can allow everybody to have a voice and be part of the research they're part in. So, let me give you an example in my own work. I am a professor in the psychology and philosophy department. I started my research investigating mother and infant chimpanzees at Gombe National Park. This day, my focus is more on dogs, more specifically on dog cognition. I have started the Smart Dog Cognition Lab to investigate the relationship between stress, personality, and how dogs perform cognitive tasks. To do this, I ask people to bring their dogs to their lab. And the first step that they have to engage in is filling a questionnaire to determine some of the traits of the personality in the dog. Now, meanwhile they do this, I like dogs to go around and sniff and make themselves comfortable in the space. As you can see, dogs make themselves very comfortable in the space. And they also like to keep an eye on what their human is riding. After we do this, we want to test the levels of stress of dogs by measuring their levels of cortisol in saliva. For this purpose, we ask their human to soak a cotton swab with their saliva so we can measure cortisol. And then we give the dogs two different types of puzzles that have inside dog treats. So you can see here's the second puzzle where they open and they discover the dog treats. The hypothesis behind this experiment is that dogs, as well as human and other human animals, can be very smart, but if their emotions are too overwhelmed, they may not be able to do a task that could otherwise be very simple for them to solve. To understand this idea, think, for example, the time when you studied really hard for an exam, and you knew all the answers, but the day of the test, you were so anxious that your mind went completely blank, right? So now, before we start running all of these tests, we ask humans to fill a consent form. So in the same way that you have to fill a consent form when you go to your doctor's office to authorize and give consent for treatment, or when you consent for cookies to be installed in your computer when you go to certain websites, we provide a consent form to all participants that explains what we're going to do and what for them to provide consent of their dog to participate in research. But when I started doing this, I started to realize, when I started to run these experiments, I started to realize that there was a contradiction in what I was doing. Because I was saying on the one hand, hey, dogs have these amazing abilities. They can have stress, they have cognitive capacities, they have personality. But I was only asking the human to sign a consent form for them to participate. Meanwhile, the dog had no saying on it. This felt wrong. So what I decided to do was take this feeling and turn it into a challenge. Now, of course, the challenge became, how can I ask dogs if they want to participate in research? And let's state the obvious. You cannot just go ahead and say, hey, do you want to participate in research? So you have to figure out a way. So to figure out this, I look into the field of pediatric research. Children often participate in biomedical research. And when they do this, many times, because of their age, they don't understand all the details of the experiment they will take part on. So we ask their parents to make decisions on their behalf because, of course, their parents will always have their best interest in mind. Now, recently we have realized that children deserve to have a voice, whether they want to participate in research or not. So what we are doing now, we're focusing instead on allowing children to tell us what is important for them in ways that are appropriate to their age. So, as every parent knows, whenever you're trying to get your child to eat broccoli or you're taking them to the dentist, children are very good to using their words, their body language, their screams to tell us what they don't want and what stresses them. Researchers take these signs and they take it as sign as something that is called in bioethics dissent. Dissent is a term that captures that feeling of, I don't like this, I want out. When researchers find these type of dissent signs, they should stop the procedure or at least reevaluate the protocol that the child is involved. In a similar way, dogs have the capacity to tell us what they want and what they don't want and what stresses them out. So now the new challenge became, how do I give dogs the opportunity to provide dissent? That is, to refuse to participate in research. Just as I did years ago with Kala, I had to start thinking in terms of what makes a dog stress and what are the ways in which a dog is able to diminish stress and protect stress from themselves. So I decided to design and test 3 different forms in which dogs can provide dissent. The first one was a poorly installed gate in the lab. As you can see, the dog, if they're stressed from the experiment, they can just push lightly to the gate and be out. The second one is a form of a wooden box. Dogs can hide inside if they find the experiment too stressful. In this case, you can see that the dog has chose to completely withdraw from the experiment because it was too much for him. And in the third one, we allow dogs to move away from the puzzle and go back with their human and stay with their human where they find this very comforting. The hypothesis behind this experiment, as I mentioned before, is to sort of think about ways in which we can diminish stress. Now, it is very important to understand that this experiment is not particularly stressful, right? Dogs are opening little compartments and they're getting treats that smell like bacon, so they're very happy. But even in non-harmful experiments like this, there is a little bit of stress involved. And as researchers, we must acknowledge that in every experiment there is some stress involved, and we should incorporate that in the design of our protocols. I believe that this includes giving them the opportunity to dissent. So, after researching all of these, we discovered that actually dogs prefer a different type of dissent mechanism based on their personality trait. But I think that the idea is more important and can be extended beyond dogs. It's not only applicable for dogs. The most important idea here is that we should provide a voice and allow people and animals to participate in this. It goes beyond dogs. What I want to think about is basically and provide you 3 final ideas to leave you with. The first one is that as researchers, we should be open and curious about the different ways in which others tell us what matters to them or not. Since the 17th century, we had made the mistake of dismissing animals' cognitive lives because they didn't have a spoken language like the one we use. We have also made similar mistakes with human language. It was, for example, only until the 1960s that we recognized American Sign Language as a genuine language. I think we should strive to try to understand and allow the different ways in which others can tell us what is important for them. Second, as researchers, we should allow or make an effort to include everybody in research and allow them to have a voice in research they participate in that affects them. And finally, as participants of research, we must be willing to use our own voice to advocate for what is important for us. I want to invite everybody here to take the challenge as I did and think what is the right way to conduct research. The right way of conducting research is an opening and evolving question that we can only answer if we make it part of our social conversation, a social conversation that will define the right way of conducting research into the 21st century. Thank you.